And welcome back to No More Nonversations. I have Miss Jade Stevens from Los Angeles joining us today. Thank you for joining, Jade.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So, just to give a little background, we met on the rough streets of LA during the height of the pandemic cycling.
Yeah.
And you've been doing quite a bit of cycling as of late, if I'm not mistaken. You recently got second place in a race and you just started cycling last year, correct?
Yeah. Officially, what? Late August? I'm almost at my year anniversary, but yep, started in August of last year.
Okay, so did you get started just out of like boredom, or have you always been a cyclist, like maybe in a previous life or years ago, and picked it back up?
No, I mean, maybe it was boredom, but it was kind of like this bike has been sitting here for a while. I should go use it. A friend of mine, well, a sorority sister of mine, she's an avid cyclist. Her name's Kanika for everyone in LA. Most of y'all know her. She invited me out to ride with her around Palos Verdes. And so for people who are not familiar with the area, it's pretty challenging for a first time rider with all of the hills and incline. So she took me out there for one of my first rides. And at the time, I was still pretty deep in the running community. And I had just came off of running a half marathon and a full marathon. And so I was just like, nah, this ain't for me. Riding my bike through these hills is crazy. So I'm just going to go back to running. And so after that, another sorority sister of mine heard that I went riding with her and was like, hey, I'm selling a bike. Are you interested? And I was like, nah, that was like a one-time thing. But she's like, okay, it's here if you change your mind. And so probably like 3 or 4 months went by, and I think I got it in June of last year. And I got it from her, and it was just sitting there because I was like, oh, okay, I got it. Maybe I'll write it if I'm bored, because when I was running, I think I had like shin splints, something where I wasn't up to running as normal. And people had told me like if you cycle or do other things, it kind of keeps you conditioned until you're ready to run again. So I went riding just around the neighborhood. I did like 5 miles and I was like, whoo, I'm doing things like 5 miles. And then another friend of mine, Tori, she invited me out to ride with us, which where we met at one of the rides. And honestly, the rest is history.
Okay, so you said a lot of things that I was unaware of. So you were into marathons and half marathons before you got into cycling.
So pause. You used marathons as plural. I've only done
Okay.
one. Just
All
one.
right. Well, all right.
Just
One
one.
is the same as 100 to me. I ain't never done one.
So my boyfriend, he's like really into the running community, and it's been one of his like personal goals to get me to run a marathon. So somehow he just got me on like a weekday, and I was like, you know what the heck, just go ahead and put my name in, let's just do it. And he took it and signed me up, and I was like, shit, I have to train now, I need to do this. And so it's hard, but I think what I really liked about it is I did the LA marathon, and it's really it's really amazing to run on the streets and run through different neighborhoods of LA, and having, I don't know, like a personal connection, because I grew up in Moreno Valley, and so I've only been in LA for maybe like 7 or 8 years, which is a long time, but in a sense of really putting a name to all the different neighborhoods, like I have my areas, but I haven't really honestly been all around LA. And so running the marathon through different neighborhoods, and then like just remembering who I was in my early 20s, running through Hollywood, looking at the clubs, running along Santa Monica, looking at the coastline, running through like downtown and some other neighborhoods. I don't know, it's just really different just running through it. So I did it for that experience because I feel like LA is so personal to me with all of the like connections I have with it. But I mean, 26.2 miles is long. It's long.
That's a
It's
hell of a long ways. Are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
and so, I mean, because you're pounding the pavement and for 22 miles on foot,
Mhm.
like walking a couple miles is exhausting. So
Yeah.
how long from the time your boyfriend said, "Hey, I'm signing you up," or the time you agreed to it to the time you ran the marathon, how long was that?
He signed me up in maybe the beginning of November. And then the marathon, so I ran it in 2019. So he signed me up November 2018. And then December, January, February, I think it was at the beginning of March. So it was maybe like 4 months.
4 months. And prior to that marathon, you had done a half marathon?
And no, so I was like, I'm going the whole way or not at all. So I did a
Okay.
marathon first. And then after that, I signed up for two halves. So the last half marathon I did was in New Orleans right before the pandemic hit. So thank God I got out of there right before Mardi Gras, because the half marathon was the weekend before Mardi Gras. And for those of you that know, like that was a really hot spot for COVID and like transmission. So I ran a half marathon the weekend before, and that was it. The world shut down after that. That was my last like big run, big race.
Okay, so most people do it the other way around. They
Yeah.
ease their way into a half marathon
Yeah.
or a 5K or something and work their way up to 26 miles.
Yeah.
Um, so like, and do you have a history of running
Mm,
prior, like in high school or college?
no, I mean, I played soccer, but I
Okay.
did track kind of like as an off-season sport. Wasn't really like extremely competitive. I did all of the sprint events. So I did the 100, 200, both of the relays, the 400. And I did what is it, the high jump, until I like hit my shoulder and I was like, nah, I can't do any field events.
Wait a second. How did you hit your shoulder on the high jump?
Stupid form. Like you, if you like run, you gotta like jump back like that.
Oh,
And
I
so
know.
imagine, yeah, imagine the post being right there and I just went wrong and it hit
Oh,
my,
you ran into the post.
you don't have to say it like that. The post
Oh,
ran into me.
hey, I ain't mad at you. I actually missed the map and like knocked myself out. I hit the ground. My head hit the ground in high school. It was a whole thing. But anyways,
Oh
uh,
my gosh.
we won't talk about that.
It's in the
Um,
past.
so okay, because there's a lot of things that I'm just now remembering and some new things that you just told me. So I forgot that you grew up in Merino Valley. Merino Valley.
The murder.
Oh, is that what they call it? The murder?
Yes. Ask Kawhi, he knows. Murder Valley.
Kawhi Leonard?
Yeah, he calls it the murder too.
The murder, is there a reason for that name?
Because so, when at the height of, the riots in 92, 93, a lot of people left LA and went to Marina Valley, including gang members and everybody. Um,
Oh.
so people don't know. I mean, I listen, for your listeners, I'm not trying to say Merino Valley is like the hood. I am not trying to like fight and rep hoods, but I mean, it's a
Just to
fact that a lot,
clarify.
yeah, but a lot of people who were in gangs or involved in like bad activity and stuff, like they moved to Merino Valley, Moval, or the Murda. And the joke was like there were these like hood ass people living in these big ass houses. Like you go in there and it's just hood as hell, but it looks really nice outside. And so that's just kind of how it was. I
Okay.
swear.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there wasn't like homicides every day and like dead people just laying around, but
Just
the
once a week. Just once a week.
yeah, once a week,
Once or twice a week. Right. Got it.
there are stats to back that up.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know anything about Merino Valley, but the murder. All right. Learning about it. The murder. Okay. Okay. So much to cover here. And you also said something, we're going to touch on all of this because you also said something about being a soror or having a
Oh
sorority.
yeah,
What
sorority,
sorority are you in?
Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated.
I mean, the yellow kind of was a tell. I was like, I don't want to make assumptions, but she does have the Sigma Gamma Rho yellow on. Okay,
Yes,
cool,
yes, yes, yes,
cool.
yes.
All right. Okay, lots to cover here. Going back to running a marathon, and now you're a heavy cyclist.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there was any carryover from the training for a marathon to cycling, or not really? Completely different type of endurance.
Mm-hmm. Uh, Conceptually, yeah. I think like the mindset that you need to be in when you're training is definitely the same, but to me, it's different. So the similarities I'll say first is um, for me at least, like you have to be consistent and you have to have varied workouts to really grow. So in running, there are different types of workouts you should do, right? So there's always the long distance, right? Like you have to make sure that you can go, you have the mental to run up to at least 20 or 22 miles to do 26.2 miles for the marathon. So distance is one part of it. The second is like interval training. So that is, doing a combination of sprints or combinations of, I guess, intervals so that your body can become familiar with being able to pick up the pace when you need to. And then there's strength training, right? So you need to be able to build your overall body to be prepared for, I say the pain, but like the workout itself. And that's the same thing for cycling. So you have to be able to do long distance. You have to be able to do climbing or elevation. You have to be comfortable with practicing with sprints. And you should also still be doing some type of strength training as well to make your muscles and joints strong and able to take on that workout as well. But the difference to me is running, I mean, it's just your body. So you should or you will start to learn what your body needs when you are training, and even when you're running the race, you should know what you need to give your body to have the endurance to last. But when you're cycling, not only do you need to understand your body, you have to understand the bike that you're on. And because I just started, like I'm still learning everything about a bike that can help make you or give you that advantage to ride better. So when you're talking about components, the type of bike, the frame, making sure it's the right size, making sure that you've properly maintained it, all of that goes into having a good race in addition to taking care of your body. So that to me is really foreign because it's like, when you're running, all you have to worry about is, are your shoes comfortable? Do you have the right soles to like keep you comfortable while you're running? But when you're on your bike, it's like, all right, did you put the right amount of air, or is your tire, does it have the right pressure, or do you have the right wheels, or do you have the right components? Did you clean the chains? Did you do this? Did you do that? Because all of that plays a part in how well your bike performs and how well you perform.
Fair. Yeah, there was so much more to cycling than I ever thought there was, because I had never done road cycling before. I grew up with
Yeah.
probably a regular Huffy,
Yeah.
like most kids. You don't think
Yeah.
about all those things. The tires never go flat. It's just always ready to go.
Yeah.
But it's the bikes definitely take a lot more maintenance than like even a vehicle. Um,
Man, say that.
it's ridiculous. It blew my mind.
When I
Um,
first started riding, I think I had a flat almost every ride because I didn't know the proper pressure to put it in. And I'm just riding over potholes, over glass. And I'm like, oh, it could take it. Because yeah, as a kid, who gets a flat? Like
yeah,
you keep
nobody gets
going.
a flat. No.
Yeah. But yeah, the maintenance is crazy on a bike, road bikes.
Way crazy. It was fun to learn though. It was definitely fun to learn, but it was a lot more than I anticipated. So you've uh, ran a marathon, but you've also cycled 100 miles in a day.
Yes. Well, it was a little bit more. I don't know if you're talking about when I went to San Diego.
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So the funny thing about well, one thing about me is I'm definitely goal driven. I like to have goals and reach them, crush them or whatever. And that also played a part in the marathon. And in terms of why I said it, I was like, I will do one marathon and see if I like it, but it's off my bucket list. I've done it. That's great. So when I started to cycle, for me at first, it was about how far can you go in terms of distance and how long can you ride in one ride. And so I had heard about people taking on a ride from LA to Santa Barbara or LA to San Diego. And I don't know, something about San Diego was just like, oh, that's it. Like that's the standard. If I don't ride ever again, I want to say that I've rode from LA to San Diego and I'll be satisfied. And so, you know, and the Century was a part of it, but the distance from where I started was downtown LA at Union Station. And the goal was to get to the train station in San Diego. I can't remember the name of it, but the total would have been 131 miles. And so me, signs, all that stuff, that was also, I just turned 31. So I was like, man, it would be dope to do this in my birthday month, ride there and get 131. That would be super dope. And go to San Diego. Like I'm checking out all these things. But I knew I couldn't do it alone because at this point, like I said, I started in August. I really had only been riding for 2.5, 3 months. And I was like, yeah, I can't do this alone. So I'm gonna need some friends. I started like asking around, and you should definitely plan ahead when you ride to San Diego, because not only do you need to make sure your bike is in its best condition to ride, but if you don't plan ahead like I did, you're going to ride on the freeway for about like 10 miles. So you have to be comfortable with that. You have to trust yourself. You have to know the road and know how to like be seen so that nobody hits you. So a lot of people were like, nah, you don't really ride. You have not ridden that long, so we are not going to ride with you because that's just not safe. And I was like, nah, I can do it. Like it's nothing. And so I did ask a few people to go with me, and they ended up, not doing it for whatever reason. No shade, but they said no. And so
No shade, no shade.
no shade, but they said no. But then, like I said, I was riding, or I do ride with us for the group, and they had just announced their first I'd say destination ride, and it was in San Diego. And for me, that was like the stars all aligned, because I was like, how am I going to ride from LA to San Diego, but also take all my gear, because I don't want to ride back on my bike to LA. The way I calculated the time it would take for me to get there, I wouldn't make it in time to get on the train. So it was like, if I didn't have help, I'd have to drive down to San Diego, get a hotel for 2 nights to drop my stuff, come back, and then ride back. And I was like, I'm not trying to do that. So when Ride With Us announced that ride, I was like, I got to do it this day or it's probably never going to happen. So a friend of mine, her name's Amber, she was like, yo, I support this. I'm trying to ride with you too. Let's do it. And she had just completed a triathlon. So we're both like feeling ourselves. We're like, yeah, we can do this. So we did it. I dropped my stuff off with Ride With Us. They took my stuff to their hotel, and we rode all day, all day to San Diego.
Wow. Okay. I mean, because I've done 100 miles. I've ridden a bike 100 miles, and you went 30 miles beyond that. Because when I just did 100 miles, I was at my limit. Like,
yeah.
I like that I mean, maybe that's how the body kind of calculates. It's like, okay, I just get to here and
Yeah.
then we'll crash.
Yeah.
But like, I was done.
Yeah.
Like 100 mile, like at mile probably 70. I was like,
oh yeah,
I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And you went 130 miles. And like I've only heard about what it feels like to run a marathon. So comparatively, which one do you think is more difficult?
oh, the marathon for sure. For
Running
sure.
26 miles is harder than cycling 131.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you say it like that, it was a race. So it's like you kind of had to keep going. With San Diego, we took, I think, maybe 1 or 2 breaks, but like it wasn't a race. It was just like, we're going to get there when we get there. And so maybe like my mindset for the marathon was like, you need to keep this pace. You need to finish by this time. You need to make sure that you don't stop. And that's the thing. When I saw people running marathons. In my mind, I always thought people ran the whole way. But like when I ran the marathon, people started out walking, like just power walking. And I don't know why that was so like mind blowing to me. I was like, yo, we can walk the marathon. They're like,
Right.
yeah. And so to me, it just, in my mind, I was like, if you walk any part of the marathon, you're a failure. But like, I mean, and I definitely walked a part of the marathon, but going into it, I just was like, you will be successful if you can run the whole thing. Don't stop. And I think I ran 20 miles nonstop. And I was like, yo, this is amazing. Because before, when I was training, I hadn't done that before. But I still at the time was like, oh shoot, like you walked at mile 20. Like, why would you do that? Like, but that's just me creating like stupid standards. I was just glad that I finished. So comparing that to San Diego, it was like, you just need to get to San Diego. It doesn't matter how you get there. And because I had already done like 50 or 60 plus miles and I had rode with groups, it's actually encouraged, you know, that you need to take a break, you need to hydrate, you need to like eat snacks. So for me, I was just like, yo, we're just riding along the coast for the day, and it's almost like you're seeing the coastline on your bike and you enjoy it. So to me, I'm not going to say it was a walk in the park, because there were definitely like rollers and incline, and there were times where it was hard, but I guess it wasn't it wasn't pain that like made me want to quit. It was just like, I don't know, natural wear and tear for the ride, which I expected.
Mm, interesting. Okay. All right. That blows my mind. That you would
Yeah, I
still.
don't think I'll ever run a marathon again. I mean, maybe, I don't want to say ever, but
Right.
probably not.
So what is it? What do you get from cycling that you don't get, as far as like satisfaction from running?
And I feel like so much. Part of it is like mental clarity. So, you know, outside of just fitness, I spend a lot of time working. Like it's like me on my laptop, on the phone, making deals, calling, doing stuff. So being on my bike without like a phone or something to distract me just really helps me kind of woosah, like clear my mind. So I think that's one thing that I really like about cycling, and that's what um first got me interested. When I was riding regularly, I was riding almost like every day or sometimes twice a day, just because it was my mental relief during the pandemic. Because other than that, like we had to stay at home and I was working, so I was just like, I need to get outside, I need to clear my mind. But I also am naturally competitive. So like riding with you, riding with T, riding with like some other super strong and fast cyclists, I was like, oh, I like riding fast. I like to see how fast I can go. And it was just something about night riding that just made it seem even more exciting. I was like, oh, like we're going 20 something miles on Crenshaw or on Jefferson and on the beach path. And that was really fun. And so that like competitive side of me, plus just going faster and seeing how fast I could go, just took me further into cycling, where you know, I started to venture out with other groups, venture out around LA and see you know, what else is out there. And there's been people who have taken me around to take on some of the like more scenic hills of LA. So, you know, Amalfi, Mandeville, Latigo, GMR, PCH, PV. I even rode to Santa Barbara. Like all those things just became like within arm's reach with my bike. And it's just something about seeing the city, seeing really anything on your bike, because it's different. I don't know, like it's just a different experience. And so pairing that like mental clarity with, if you can even imagine the competitive side of me, like through this is just, I don't know, it just does something for me. It's super satisfying. I love it.
No, I completely agree. There's some, because I had never been a cyclist before, and
Right.
there's something about a physical activity uh, that allows you to move at 20, 30, 40,
Yes.
50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You know, having to dodge potholes and squeeze through cars and sometimes pedestrians, like if you're on the bike path,
Yeah,
there's a rush that I don't feel like I got anywhere else. And
exactly.
just the group of people we rode with out in LA too. Terrence
Yep.
with Tour de Friends, and
Yep.
you know, the Major Motion crew and Ride with Us, and just all of our crew. It was there. I don't think there's anything that I could compare it to. It's its own
Right.
unique thing.
Yeah.
It's its own unique thing. Okay, so switching gears slightly, you grew up in the murder, and you've spent the last 9 years in the City of Angels.
Yep.
So, what do you think is the biggest difference? Is you enjoy LA more than Moreno Valley? Moreno Valley? Is it a harder adjustment? Is there something about the energy of the city that you can't
Yeah.
get in Moreno,
Yeah.
or what's the contrast there?
Moreno Valley is a suburb city, so it's really quiet. You probably never hear sirens or a helicopter. All you hear is people jumping in their pools during the summer because it's so hot. It's like probably easily 99, 98. Could definitely get in the low hundreds. And so, yeah, I don't know, it's just a suburb city. And for me, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I do like the energy of LA. I love how I honestly feel like there's a group for everyone in LA. I feel like there's something for everyone to do. And I'm an outdoorsy person. And so I think it's true where you can say, you can go either to the beach, to a lake, to the mountains, or a club, like all within, an hour. There's so much to do. And again, like there's so many different groups. From like what you heard, like me running and like with my sorority, like there's so many different like types of people within LA that you can find community with. And I guess for me in Moreno Valley, it's not really like that. And maybe I'm biased now because I grew up there. So for me, I see it as I know all you guys because we went to school together, or I knew you because you went to one of these schools. Um, but I don't really feel like one, there's a lot to do in Moreno Valley, and two, I just think it's too quiet. Like where I live in South LA. So yeah, like I hear sirens all the time. I'm right under the LAX's flight path. So there's a plane going over like every 2 hours or so. I'm not tired of it yet. I guess like I think maybe I'll get there one day when everyone's like, nah, like these sirens, people yelling, all this, like the bustle, like, yeah, it could annoy people. But to me, I just feel like that's the pulse of the city. Like that's how you know like people are here.
You're absolutely right. That is the pulse of the city, and it never lets you forget that people are there. That
Yeah.
is
Um,
for sure, for sure. It was because I think, what is this, 2021? I think this year, towards the end of this year, would have been 10 years for me in Southern California. Probably
mm,
a total of 7 years in LA. Um, so yeah, I had my fill of it. I had my fill, because it's exactly what you described.
yeah.
But that peace and quiet that you described is also like
Yeah.
kind of what I like. I like to be able to like go find the noise and be able to leave it.
Yeah. And the thing is like it's funny because if I could live somewhere, or I don't know, retire, like I think I would really do well in like a forest or like Big Bear or something like that, just being in
Mm,
trees and cabin. And I like the peace there, so it's within reach. Like I appreciate the peace and quiet. um but I guess I'm just not tired of it here yet. I definitely don't like to hear all of the mess of like people arguing and like people acting out and acting a fool. But other than that, like just hearing all the stuff, I don't know, it just lets me know like, hey, the
okay.
city's bigger.
Okay. So let's play this game here. Just hypothetically speaking,
Uh-huh.
if you could have a house, your dream house, anywhere in, let's say, the city of LA, where would you put it? Where would you have it?
In the city of LA.
Los
Huh.
Angeles County, shall we say? Because I guess
Oh, LA County.
let's say LA County.
Um, I would live, I would probably either live in like Wilmington. I don't know if that's the Wilmington area, but over by the like the ships and everything.
The
Is
ships
that
like San
Wilmington?
Pedro?
Yeah. But isn't Wilmington like right next to San Pedro?
Maybe I've never.
Let's just say San Pedro, because that's actually very close. Either there or Culver City.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think. Well, both of those places are actually really great. I've hung out in San Pedro, and it does have a different vibe to it than LA. But it's still kind of busy. It's like a small town,
Mhm. Yeah.
but there's still a lot to do there.
Yep.
And Culver City was always like I think it's like a hidden gem of LA. It's kind of like in the heart of LA, but nobody really talks about it. But it's a great place to be. I love Culver City, so that's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
and so, do you think that like LA is it for you? Like, because you mentioned for a while back you were considering moving to the great state of Maine. Maine. I never hear anybody talk
Yeah.
about Maine, but you were considering Maine.
So yeah, that was all for greed, all for economic purposes.
Okay.
Because Maine was, I don't know if they still are, but they offer a considerable tax credit to uh, people who move into the state. I think for the last no, at least 5 years. Like if you live there now, and you move there and you stay there for like at least a year or 2 years, when you file your taxes, you get like these amazing credits. They're pretty much like just paying people to move there because the population is getting older and older, and they realize that they're gonna eventually not have anybody living there because it's, I think like the average age is like 50 or 60. So they want to bring younger people there to kind of keep the city going. And so, yeah, they're pretty much paying people to go there. And I was like, shoot, at the pandemic proved for some, I don't want to say for everybody, for most people, that there is a remote option and it's possible to do your work remote. I'm fortunate enough that the work that I do allows me to work from home. So there really is no geographic boundary for my work. And if they're paying me to live there, I mean, I can do that for 2 years or 3.
Fair.
But yeah, it's just not for me right now. It's just, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing really well in LA. I still have hope that I can buy property in LA County somewhere. I hope that happens. But
That can happen.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, you just gotta be on it. But Maine is it's an idea, a dream. It's not something that I've put down on paper to like actually plan out, but it's just good to know that it's there if I wanted to.
So, um, what was the straw that broke the camel's back in Maine for you?
It wasn't Maine per se. I think it's more LA that made it more, there were more pros to stay in LA than there were cons to stay in LA, or pros, however you want to say it. But in terms of my work, I work with different levels of government and nonprofits that are extremely reliant on LA city government and LA County supervisors. And so you could definitely make the case that you can still be in another state, or honestly in another time zone, and do the work that I do. But sometimes, because the world is opening back up, California is opening back up, I can see that meetings will be taking place in person really soon for the work that I do. And some of it's going to require me to be local to like make something happen. And so I don't think that I will progress at the rate that I believe I can if I'm in another state.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Because before we started this call, you said that you were Jamaican. And
I was like, I
so,
did.
could you tell us what 5 jobs you're holding
Yeah.
down?
So yes, so I am a professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills. I teach in the communications department for the undergrad program. I
Didn't know
also,
that. Awesome.
yes, I am also a director of communications, or the director of communications for a nonprofit called LA Promise Fund. I also own my own company, which is a consulting firm. And then through there, I contract out to fill in positions for other communicators who are either like out on leave or just need support on a team. And so through there, I have multiple clients, but there are 3 of them that I'm kind of like sitting in as a like a communications associate, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the ones that take up most of my time. But I also have a team of 3 people who are like under me that also help me run my other clients within my consulting firm.
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. Okay, so let's start with you being a professor in communications and just education in general, because I find education to be fascinating, just how we engage with it, how we do it. I have my reservations about how America goes about their educational system. Um, I think there are better ways to do it. But I mean, what would you say like the American educational system does well? And then what would you like to see it do?
Mm, so I'll only comment on higher education because I don't really know that much for K through. Well, I kind of do, but not.
You were
I
a
don't
student
think I know
at
enough.
K through 12. You were a student, you know.
But I think being a professor now, like I have a renewed respect for teachers now. So my original opinion is like, oh dang, like I didn't know you had all these restrictions on you. So there kind of is a hint at where I'm going. So I think what we do well from an education standpoint is we do allow for creativity, and we are now allowing for students to interpret and express themselves in ways that are, I guess, best suited for themselves in terms of how um, they're learning material. So an example of that is, for example, my client, or sorry, not my client, but working with LA Promise Fund, they oversee different programs to support high school and middle school. And so there's this program called Arts Matter that pretty much trains teachers to teach their students how to apply arts to different subjects. So, for example, if you can imagine your math teacher giving you a word problem that you have to solve. You know, you have 3 apples, 2 oranges, a variable, blah, blah, blah. Figure out how to make that happen. For me, I really struggled with math in terms of remembering formulas, Pythagorean theorem, all that stuff. Like that just wasn't my forte. I did the best that I could, but I wasn't great. But the Arts Matter program allows students to use, for example, with example, animation and video to bring that problem to life. So if I am very visual and I'm artistic, I can show you how 3 apples, this variable, and 2 oranges come together to get you the answer. It's probably an extra way to, solve a formula, but it's an interesting way to fuse 2 things that are seemingly very different into a way that a student can understand so that they can learn. They also do that for like history and history and science. So like
And
with
this is at the
history,
college level.
this is K through 12.
This is K through 12. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. Allowing like that creativity in different ways to approach it. For higher education, I think what we do well is I don't know. I can only speak from Dominguez Hills view because that's the only place I've been. But I think we do really well with showing the practical way of education and how it will be integrated into your career or whatever it is that you aspire to be. So we work really hard to make sure that we are connecting students early in the program to people that are in the field. So if you think you are interested within communications, if you're interested in advertising, we really advocate for you to find a advertising or connect you to an advertising professional so you can almost be mentored or at least talk to them to see if you want to do that way before you're a senior and you realize you don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's really important because I don't know, I feel like we're in an age now where college education is not valued the same way that it was when I was growing up. And in some cases, that's okay, because there are some people who were not meant for college, and that's okay. Like, I think we're at that point where it's okay. But I think for those that are in college and there is, lack of motivation or kind of looking on the other side, and it seems like people who didn't go to college are flourishing as an influencer or flourishing as I don't know, something that doesn't require a degree, it's really hard to see, like, why am I in these classes? What is that really going to turn out in terms of like a gain for me? And so I think for us in our program, we work really hard to say, like, these are the people that you aspire to be. These are the VPs, the CEOs, the head of communications for brands that you know and love. They went through this program like you did, and they took these classes, and this is how this class will prepare you for your role. And I mean, and we stand by it. I mean, I am a working professional and I work really hard to like bring them into the work that I'm doing so that they can see it. Um, but I'm trying to think of another example, but like, that's the point. Like, we're really big on integrating the field of the work that we're all in into the classroom so that it's not such a shock when they graduate and they have at least some idea of what it's like to work in the real world.
Interesting. Okay, and with that being said, because me personally, I feel like because I have an undergraduate degree, I have a graduate degree, and I still feel like out of those two degrees combined, that I've only been able to apply about 5% of that information in my professional career.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, in your experience, because I mean, you're obviously, since this is something that you're aware of, you're probably doing a much better job of preparing your students for the real world. But for your college experience, how much of that information do you think was applicable to your professional environment?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I think that's how I got my job as a professor, because I kept in contact with like two or three of my professors and told them, I was like, yo, I feel like y'all didn't teach me this. I'm in my entry level role. I'm really excited. I did the internship like you guys told me, but there are things that I just really had no idea about, and I feel like we could have learned that in class. And so I agree. I mean, I don't know if it's 5%, but I would say that a considerable amount of the stuff that I learned in my undergrad was not really applicable to the work that I was doing. So I'm trying to think of an example, but I mean, we talked a lot about I don't want to say outdated case studies, but I think specifically for communications, things are changing all the time. And so textbooks, outdated case studies don't really set your students up for success, because at that time, like, social media was just coming out. A lot of things were changing by the minute. And I felt like our class was always like 5 years, sometimes, like, I don't want to say 10, but like we were a couple of years behind. And when I went into my internship, which turned into a full-time job, I was just like, we've never talked about this. And I felt like the stuff that we asked about, our professors were like, hey, is this important? Should we spend more time on this? And professors were like, I mean, it's something, but like, here's the core of communications. You should know the core. And I think there was just an imbalanced weight on what they thought was important based on what was happening in the real world. But there were some professors, and I think that's why I took the role on, as a professor, who I can recall, they changed their whole curriculum for that reason. So one thing that I think we I didn't learn when I was an undergrad was like the structure of working in a communications agency. I'm not really sure how that would translate to other industries, but working in an agency, it can be really shocking for a student who, may not have been working or has never worked in communications prior to that role. And so this professor, my mentor and dear friend who got me this job, Professor Chris Russo, he changed his class to be an agency. Like he turned it into I don't know, an incubator for an agency. He brought in real clients. He brought in like real things that we were offering commentary on. And I don't know, it was really empowering because we were able to see that our classwork was not something that was just turned in for a grade. It was something that these nonprofits went in and applied for. And for some reason, I mean, not for some reason, like I know like that's what gave us the confidence to know that the examples and the ideas that we're coming up with are good enough for a client to take. And when you're working for an agency, that's all it is. Like you are valued by your mind, your ability to be creative, but also your networks. And so I think being in that class and being able to, one, build a network from the clients we were pitching ideas to, plus having a real portfolio to say like, hey, this wasn't just something that we turned in. This is on their website right now, or you can see it on their social media. It's, I don't know, it's just a really a big confidence boost for us. And I think we need that. We need more of that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Just real world application. Because
Mhm.
I've spoken to a number of people who have said the same thing as that, that they wish they had had more professors to give them real world applications. And some
Mhm.
of them have good professors. Depending on what school you go to, the teachers seem to take more of an interest in their students and making sure that they have opportunities beyond college.
Mhm.
Um, Based on the field that you're in, would you say that the majority of people have like a communications degree, or do they come from other fields and have found their way in communications?
It's mixed. It's
Yeah.
mixed. Yeah, and I think that's kind of been the debate within communications, specifically in PR, probably in advertising as well, but a lot, yeah, I'd say definitely for sure in advertising, but um a lot of people think they can work in communications because they've been able to develop a strong following on social media, or they really built a strong personal brand and people can, really latch onto that. And I think that those skill sets are extremely valuable and notable. But what I think is lacking is critical thinking and strategic thinking. How can you take the lessons that you've learned from building your personal brand and translate that into building the brand of an insurance company or something that's really boring that people don't care about, the government, for example, which I've worked for um, two elected officials. And so like, how do you make an elected official seem interesting? How do you get people that are within their districts to care about, infrastructure? How do you get them to care about, tax and revenue? Like that's really hard to do. And so if you feel like, hey, and I am not diminishing what influencers do because there's a role for that, but like the things that you do to become an influencer doesn't always translate for, I'm just throwing out non-sexy names like the financial industry or elected officials. I think that that's the debate that's has been going on in communications. Like, should there be a certification, and if so, should we enforce that? Because there are different outside of a degree, you can get certified to work in PR. It's called an APR, associate, I'm sorry, accredited public relations. And so at one point you needed to have an APR to kind of like rise to the ranks in communications, but like no one's really enforcing it, and no one really values it, right? And so people that have gone through the process of getting accredited in public relations, for example, and in communications, they put all this work into it, and they do well. Like they have a strong understanding of communications, but they really could get bumped out for someone who, has a strong Twitter following because I don't know, it's like just mismatched skill sets. And so like that's the debate, should we continue to reward people that are building viral moments because all of our clients want viral moments, or should we still prioritize people that are in the classroom who are going through the accreditation process and give them a shot? I am not on either side. I'm kind of in the middle because I think there's value in both, but in general, I just think there needs to be an ability for people to better understand strategic thinking and critical thinking.
Strategic thinking and critical thinking. I
Hard to
agree.
find. Hard to find.
Very hard to find. For the people who are not in the communications industry, what do you think would be the most surprising thing that they can learn
In communications?
about communications? What would surprise them?
That's a really good question. I think it's not surprising, but I guess it's more of like a sobering fact is communications is not all about red carpets and celebrities. That's honestly a small percent of what communications is. And I say not surprising because only because my students say this, like every year they're like, oh, we're in LA, we're in the entertainment capital of the world. I'm going to go work for this, athlete or this, celebrity or whoever. And one, it's really hard to work in, but like, it's not the only industry within communications. Literally everybody needs communication. So from, I'm trying to think of another boring industry, pins. Like
What?
pins.
Oh, like writing pins.
Writing pins or
Okay.
pins.
Okay. I like
Yeah.
pins. I think those are exciting, but
But
continue.
it's like, name a brand. What's your favorite brand?
Zebra.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that
Right
big?
now.
Oh, I've never heard of zebra.
Yeah, they've got I don't know, it's a preference. I use Bic as a solid, long-lasting pen, one that you can
Yeah.
keep in your car, and it's pretty reliable after like 4 or 5 years, that'll eventually work.
Yeah.
But I like Zebra right now. I was a big fan of the G2s,
Oh.
LG2s for a while, but they smear. I don't like this. Anyways, we're getting too far into
Yeah.
the
You know
realm
way more
for
than but I guess like that's the thing. Like it's just a reminder that in communications, like everybody needs a communicator. And so everyone is fighting tooth and nail for that fancy tech job or that fancy entertainment job, which is great. They pay well. It's an exciting thing. But like there are people who will pay, probably twice that if you can make me or you remember another brand in the pen industry than Bic. Like make my name more memorable than that. Make Kleenex a name that no longer matters, like, because that's a brand, it's really tissue, right? But like Kleenex is the brand and we use them synonymously. If you are a strong communicator, a strategic communicator, you should be able to jump into industries like those and make a name for something that you've never heard before and shift the entire thinking.
Okay,
Um,
that's interesting. Okay, no, that makes sense because I mean, this is giving me more clarity because the first question that comes through my mind is like, well, how do you differentiate between communications and marketing?
oh, okay. Yeah. So communications is like the umbrella term.
Okay.
It covers three main disciplines. So communications is, or let me say it like this: marketing, advertising, and public relations all fall under communications. Marketing is probably, I don't want to say the most important, but probably the one that you hear the most about. Marketing is usually associated with branding, with publicity, partnerships, influencers. Like they kind of handle all of that for marketing. Under marketing is advertising and PR. Advertising is also what you think it is. Think of all the TV ads, the social ads, the radio ads, anything that is considered an ad, a billboard, a poster, um, the stuff you see on cars, like those virtual things. Like those are all examples of advertisement. Public relations is what I call like earned media, or a way for you to get a way to build your reputation or to maintain the reputation of a brand. And that's usually done through like interviews or anything to do with media. Super oversimplified, but like that's, if you can visualize like this umbrella, it's like any PR, advertising, and marketing is all communications. Under that is marketing, advertising, and PR.
I caught about 3% of that. um, but it sounded really good. It was kind of confusing for me.
Sorry, I tried to simplify it.
You did. I mean, like if I was able to, I probably need one of those animated visuals that you were talking about, and I would probably learn it that way a little better because I should be ashamed of that. But
no, it's a good question. I try and put an example with it so you can remember. Like advertising is always going to be a TV ad. PR is just think of like any interviews that you may have. Like this would be a PR strategy to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And then marketing is just like your brand overall. Like they kind of sit in the background and determine like who you are. Like when you think of Chick-fil-A versus McDonald's in terms of customer service, I usually say that like, which one has the better customer service? Probably
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A. But that fits into like their brand. Like that's a part of who they want to be known for. They want to be known for offering like amazing customer service. McDonald's wants to be known for, giving like low priced, they're trying to say healthy food now, but like that's not who McDonald's wants to be. And they don't care if you say, oh, Chick-fil-A has better customer service. They're still killing it when it comes to, their business model. So that has to do with their brand. Like how do you describe them? And that's marketing. How would you define yourself?
And then communications is
all of that.
All of that. Okay. So what you're saying? Okay. So you're saying maybe. So I've created an image in my head to try to make sense of it for myself. So you're saying at the very top of the umbrella is communications, and then under communications you have marketing and advertising and PR. No. Excuse me. Advertising, marketing, PR, advertisement.
Marketing. So communication at the top, marketing, and then like 2 lines under marketing, PR and advertising.
PR and advertisement. Okay, got it. Okay. So basically when PR and advertisement, though the PR and advertisement departments, they come up with an idea, they got to get it approved by marketing.
Yeah, for the most part. Advertising for sure, but PR, now we're getting down in the weeds, but like PR and marketing, they be going at it because PR wants to do its own thing because they have different goals in mind, because PR is all about having a better reputation. Marketing is like, we just want to make sure we sell stuff. So sure, our reputation should matter, but like if people are still buying stuff, we don't really care. So there's like a debate around that. And then that goes into the bigger conversation, which I don't know if we're going down that road today, but like when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, when we're talking about like corporations' responsibility to make statements, that's where PR and marketing will fight, because PR will be like, we got to be on the right side of history. We got to make sure that people know where we stand. But then, CEOs, CMOs, which is chief marketing officer, they're going to be like, yeah, that might matter, but like if people are still buying our stuff, why do we need to say anything at all? And so that's kind of how communications internally will debate to say like, yes, your bottom line may not change, but one day when we're talking about these boycotts and we're talking about, walking out, one day it's going to matter and you're going to wish that you had said something, because if you wait until a walkout or boycott happens, it's already too late. We saw that with NFL. We saw that with Papa John's. We saw that with H&M. Like there's so many brands, all the fashion brands, right? Like we see that happen all the time, where brands are like, X'd, blacklisted because they didn't do the right thing. And so I'm sure there's a PR person on all of those teams where like, damn it, I told you we should have said something like months ago, but marketing is like, nah, it's fine. Like they're still buying, they're still with us until they're not. And then PR has to clean it up.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm trying this new little strategy that I have of like when there's a new concept, like pairing it up to aspects of the body or aspects of a person.
Okay.
So it's like, all right, well, it's like PR is not the ego. It's like maybe marketing is the ego, and like PR is your conscience. This is your conscience speaking. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good analogy. I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, you could definitely say PR is your conscience telling you like, no, don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it.
Okay. I'm gonna work on that analogy because I think it's helping me. Okay, so before we switch lanes here, because we can definitely switch lanes to some of the organizations or movements that you've just brought up. Um, but if you were elected to be the commencement speaker for a graduating class, but you could only give one sentence of advice, what would it be?
Hmm. One sentence. I would probably say, and I don't even know if this is a complete sentence, but I would say, whatever it is, do it. There's so many other people. No, let me say it like this. Whatever it is, do it. There are so many folk. I don't know how to say it in one sentence. Whatever it is, do it, because there will be plenty of others telling you you can't. I don't know if that like fully captures it, but one thing that I live by now is like, don't tell yourself no. There's so many other people out there that will tell you you can't do it for whatever reason. And when you are in college, graduating, or even in high school, there's going to be a lot of people telling you you should do this or you are better off doing that. And I think even in college and in high school, you're at an age where you should be trying things. Like you should be open to experiences. You should be open to failing. You should be open to trying multiple things to see if you like it. You shouldn't be so like laser focused on like, this is my only way. Um, because if you do, again, going back to the pandemic, like you could be really SOL. Like there were so many people who lost their jobs, so many people who lost so much because I feel like they had their eggs in one basket. And there are other reasons, obviously, health, access, and I'm not really saying that, but I'm saying in terms of people who were relying on one stream of income or one option to make it big. And for whatever reason, they thought that was good enough. If you have the if you allow yourself to try something new, you never know what can happen with that. As long as you have the capacity to do it, like why can't you do it? Try it.
That's great advice. No, that makes complete sense. That is great advice. And what would you, so switching lanes here, I mean, this is in, but what you just said, I think that's profound in a sense, because it's just trying it. Because I think what holds a lot of people back is that doubt, that self
Mhm.
doubt, that fear of what if I can't, that fear of failure. It's like, well, you don't know what you can or can't do yet. You have to try it first. Um, so uh, you mentioned the the image or the, how should I say, the message that organizations are portraying to the people around them. So when it comes to the state of America right now in society, and uh, let's bring it back to just you as an individual,
Mhm.
what has been your experience as a Black female moving through not only the professional environment, but the world?
Um, it's just tiring. It's exhausting, honestly. I'm probably gonna butcher the quote, but what is it? Was it James Baldwin who said, you know, to be woke is to be exhausted, and I'm gonna say it wrong. I'm gonna look it up and like put it in your captions so you can get it right.
Okay.
But like the idea of being woke or just being aware is just like being angry and frustrated all the time, because there's just, there's so many things that in terms of the state of our country, um, that has, you know, systematically made it hard for women and hard for Black women, Black people to really progress. I mean, we're just coming off of the heels of the 100th anniversary of, you know, Tulsa and the massacre and the destruction of, you know, Black Wall Street. And it's just like every time you hear, or I hear, you know, oh, it's not that bad, right? Like more Black, this is the year of Black women, right? We're getting offered opportunities. We're seeing ourselves in more like shows and in more, you know, advertisements. We're giving more opportunities, but it's just like at the same time you're reminded of all of the other barriers that held us back and why we should be further than where we are today. You know, there's Tulsa, we have what is it? The beach over here in Redondo Beach or Hermosa Beach that uh, man, I gotta remember these names so I can refer to them. But
Bruce's Beach.
Bruce's Beach, you know, like they just voted on, you know, possibly giving them a sliver of what, you know, the original family had. But it's like, damn, like how many years has it been for them to even consider that, right? And so to know that um, there have been efforts to try to suppress, to force us to forget what happened to our people. And when we hear like, oh, you guys don't have it that bad, or why can't you just, you know, just work a little bit harder or do something, it's like, it's not that simple, you know, like it's not that simple. And so the more that you dig into the history and you understand, you know, how we got to where we are, and having to explain it to people while also trying to just do good on your own is just exhausting, right? Like I think for me to own my own business, I am very proud to own my own business and you know, I'm proud of that. So I appreciate people that are cheering me on, but like every now and then someone will say like, oh, you know, as a Black woman, you've gotten really far, or as a Black woman that like, just to say as a Black woman, it to me is triggering because it's almost like, are you saying that I should be something else? Like, do you feel that should I be fitting another stereotype? Um, is this not what you expected Black women to do, to own their own business, to do what I do, to be involved in all that I am in? And I think like that part's exhausting. And for me, I try to re refocus it into motivation because there's still so many opportunities to be the first Black woman for things, right? Like there's our first Black vice president, right? Black female Black president. Going back to cycling, you know, we just had our first Black pro cyclist, right? There's still a lot of firsts for Black women. And for me, you can look at it as like, damn, like why is that the case? Like, why have we not progressed in 2021? Why are we still having the first of these conversations? But then it's just motivating to be like, okay, I see that as an opportunity for me, but also a way to open the door and leave a trail for others to follow, so we won't have these anymore. Like it's exciting, but it's also like, damn, 2021, like we're still having first this, really? um so yeah, that's what it's like to be a Black woman right now.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I say this, you know, all the time whenever I'm speaking to a Black woman or a woman in general. Is like I as a man have no, I can't even fathom like what it means to walk through the world as a woman. And it's just such a burden that you guys have to carry day in and day out, you know, with constant critiques. And just for, for a Black woman, you've gotten so far for a
Yeah,
woman. It's like, it can be kind of triggering. It's like, well, what were you expecting?
yeah.
That seems to be the right approach that you're taking. It's like, you have to find a way to turn that into motivation,
Mhm.
because it can definitely be consuming without a doubt. And those things that you've mentioned, the events like the Tulsa massacre is probably one of the saddest stories in American history, in my opinion, because I mean, obviously slavery is terrible and sad in itself, but it's like, okay, slavery is ended, and you have a group of Black people who have elevated themselves and have done well for themselves. And not only was it torn down once, but twice. And just so many, it was like there's this group of people that hated, just have this disdain for Black and brown people. And it's just really sad when you think about that. And a lot of people don't even like bringing it up in conversation because it is just so tragic. It's like, no, this group of people is doing well. They're happy, they're healthy, they're thriving, and they're trying to do, and I'm sure they are, you know, proud to be where they're at in America, because I'm sure at some point they could be like, you know what, let's go back to Africa, or let's go back to the islands. At some point they could have done that. They're like, no, we're making it work here. And for that to be stripped away is very troubling. It's very
Yeah.
troubling. And like and again, like Bruce's Beach, just, and they're considering giving a sliver back.
Yeah. It's, and that's the thing. I've been educating myself a little bit more on the massacre. So I'm still learning, but I think what really stuck with me on that was the systematic way of forced erasure of that, right? So the enforcement that was presiding over like the case, the police, the judges, the entire government at the time said that reporters could not take photos, and if they did, they needed to destroy them, that you couldn't speak of it, you couldn't come to the areas that were damaged. And it was almost like, we are making the effort to force everyone to forget. And so for everyone that was not Black, I'll just say, white people, like for them, it was, we're guilty, right? Because this all started from, I think, someone who was shining shoes, who went into an elevator with a white woman, and the white woman claimed that the guy tried to come onto him. The charges were dropped, but that's what pretty much spurred or like started the massacre. They used that one thing to go into Greenwood, to destroy it, and then only to come to find out that that case was dropped. And they're like, well, damn, like we already destroyed this whole city for something that didn't even really happen, right? And so they pretty much erased it, did not acknowledge it. And then Black people felt like they couldn't speak up because they're like, we've seen what they're capable of. We don't want this to happen again. The Ku Klux Klan is, starting to rise again. And it's like, we don't want to say anything. We don't want to have our homes burned again. And so it's just, yeah, like you said, it's a sad story. It's a frustrating story because, people who are not invested in understanding the full history of our country will quickly brush it off and say, okay, well, you're thriving now, or just get over it, or, you're doing well, or you could just easily, I don't know, you can get through it like we did. Everybody has the same starting point, and that's just not true. And and the other point I was going to make in terms of forced erasure is like, those are the things that we know about, and we only know about that because the people who have survived, they're in their hundreds. I think someone did an interview, and I think she's turning 107, and she's like, I'm going to take my last breath someday, and I have to get this off my chest. Like, someone has to hear this story. But like, just imagine how many other instances like this around the country that we don't know about. And that's the same thing for like police brutality. Like, these are the things that people are willing to document and share, but there's so many stories that we don't know about, that we probably won't ever know about because of not wanting to face the consequences, or for whatever reason. But like, we really won't know.
Right.
And I think like that's what's really it's frustrating, it's unfortunate, but considering all that has happened in these last 12 months, from George Floyd to all of us really holding uh, everybody accountable, like anybody, I think we're now really forcing our representatives to take a look in the mirror and to really understand what has happened. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but I do think we've taken a pretty large step to getting some type of acknowledgement. And sometimes that's gonna have to be enough, right? Like, there's been a lot of conversation about reparations or giving us stuff back to kind of make up for the lost time. And I'm for it. Like, please give us our stuff. But I think that right now we're at a point where even acknowledgement is something that is a victory.
Right, absolutely, and I think it starts with acknowledgement. And it's fascinating to me how quickly people want to move beyond it, with the narrative of just get over it, or it's hard for everybody, and we all have to get
Mm-hmm.
over it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that I to a degree, it's like, okay, yes, but it's like, where is the harm in acknowledging it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is it so hard to be like, yeah, that shit sucked for you?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always fascinating to engage with someone who is just completely unwilling to even acknowledge it. Um, and some Okay, so I don't know about this new thing that's been circulating, but you being in the educational field, maybe you can help me understand what it is. And that's the concept or idea of critical race theory.
Mm.
Do you know kind of what they're trying to do with that? Because I've only seen it in a few articles and I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, I also am not as I don't know that well either, but I'll definitely look into it. I don't think I know enough of it to comment.
Okay. The What I'm gleaning is that it's basically, because you're talking about the forced erasure
Yeah.
of these terrible events, and I think what critical race theory is, it's a forced acknowledgement through the educational system, or like, I wouldn't even say forced, but it's just like a teaching of the good and bad sides of our country, and
Right.
I think that's what it is, but I'm not sure.
So is it like a requirement to tell, like you said, all sides of this? And I hate to say all sides, but like the full history of it?
I think that's what it is.
Okay. Um, so I mean, I definitely think that that's important because you know, take, Thanksgiving. Like I only learned about that in my late 20s of, how that impacted Native Americans, right? Or Native Indians. I really had no idea that when the settlers came in, like that was the cost to that community. When you're talking about even the positive side of our contributions, right? Like we really don't know about um, all people of color in terms of their contributions to our country. When I used to work for the city of LA, I learned a lot about um, what was it? For like each Heritage Month, we talked about the contributions to the city of LA. So like knowing how we're in June, like how the LGBT community contributed to some of the like nightlife and some of the clubs and how they set some of the trends in LA, or understanding how certain Asian American individuals played a huge part in the development of our government, and understanding how I'm always drawing a blank on names, but like the African architect who built all of the celebrities' homes, like there's such a rich history, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge like this came from different cultures. It's not just like LA's history. It's like it's cultural history, and I think it's important to acknowledge that because it whether you want to acknowledge it or not, like it's really empowering to see someone like you that did something that is in your history book that looks like you. It makes you feel like there's a chance. So I I mean, I don't know if the debate is to change textbooks and add that part, but I feel like we should. When I went to study abroad in Germany, like everybody learned the history of the Holocaust. Bless
Mhm.
you.
Thank you.
Every,
Thank you.
everybody learned the history of the Holocaust, right? Like everyone knew the part that Germany played into it. Like everybody in Germany knew that. And so it's not something that they shy away from, right? Like everybody has to know. It's something that they all take as like a pledge to say like we as a country will not let that ever happen again. Like we let things get out of hand. um and so there have been like instances, especially now with like the EU breaking up, or really the UK like leaving, Brexit. There has been instances where there was like talks of that happening again, but like it didn't, because everybody knows the history of what could happen if we let one specific party that feels like a certain ideology or a specific like opinion, if it gets too much power, it could really take over a community. And so I feel like if we were similar to Germany in the US in terms of acknowledging the good and the bad sides of our history, not just to the people we bothered here, but the terrible things we did in other countries as well. Like if we could just acknowledge that, I think that that would really shape us as an American to be a little bit more worldly and more aware. So I feel like it should. I'm sure I can understand or at least think of what the opposing side would be to not add that. But I mean, it's our history. We should know it.
What do you think the opposing side would say?
I think the opposing side feels like it diminishes honestly the history that they think of America to be as. Like, I think they'll think of it as you are disrespecting a country that is supposed to be a place that we should feel safe in and we should feel proud to be an American of, if that makes sense. Like we don't need the bad side because it might make people feel like they're less, like they shouldn't be proud to be an American, and it tarnishes our history. And I'm like, that's bullshit, because I think everything deserves critique. You know, you can love your country but still be critical of it. I mean, that's the only way to grow. And so if we are going to continue to perpetuate a history that doesn't give the full story, at some point, like we're going to have more like issues and tension that happens, because I really think a lot of the root of, well, I'd say racial tension just comes from people not acknowledging and not knowing the full story. Like if we could just really understand people and understand like the history and how things came to be and be empathetic and not just, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? If we could be empathetic and not diminish other people's experiences, I feel like we'd be a lot further in a lot of ways.
I completely agree. I think empathy has been a popular word as of late, but it's so hard to do, I think, for a lot of people. Even because even um people who are saying that others should have empathy, I wonder how difficult it is or how often they practice empathy in other areas, because you don't really see it. Like I'm going to use a simple example here. When you're driving on the 405,
I was just gonna say, yeah.
like
Yep.
how much empathy is everyone showing? And it's like next to none.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I think a lot of people use empathy, use that term when it's convenient, when it
Mm-hmm.
supports your narrative, but it's like to understand it, you have to also practice it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is, and I'm speaking, outside of race here because as race, but I mean, it comes with race too. It comes with
Yep.
race too. Like you have to be able to like know what it looks like and how hard it is to practice in a tough situation.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so when you said that, I thought you were going down the road of homelessness and people who are unsheltered, because when you're on the freeway now, I mean, I'm sure you saw before you left, the homeless population has just skyrocketed. And
mhm.
so, everyone acknowledges that it's a problem and everybody wants people to not be on the streets. But the way that the city is trying to solve it is, create housing for them to go to, but also ask people who have space in the back of their homes to like turn those into units so that they can house more people who were unsheltered into those places. And so conceptually, it's a great idea, right? Like everyone gets a home, let's build this. But like you're starting to see different neighborhoods say like, oh yeah, but before you put them in shelters over here or in my backyard, put them over there in Inglewood or over there by South LA, and then come over here. or even like different counties, right? Like there was a big thing about Orange County officials busing homeless people into LA, into Skid Row, because they didn't want to deal with them anymore. And so the term is NIMBYism, NIMBY, an acronym for not in my backyard, where it's like, yeah, we want everyone to have a home, but don't bring them over here, put them over there. It's like, to me, like that's been the biggest thing about empathy, where it's like, your heart goes out to seeing all these people intense, and you don't want people to be on the streets. But when you have a responsibility to even do like a small piece in this huge problem that we have, because it's not just one solution to why people are homelessness, all you need to do is allow your government to create shelters in your neighborhood, or turn this area that you're not using into a unit so someone can live there. You're like, oh, homeless people, I don't know, like, I don't know. But it's like, if you've never been homeless, if you've never spoken to someone who's, had to sleep in their car or unfortunately on the street, like, not everyone is a drug addict. Not everyone is, dealing with mental health. Some people really had it tough. Again, the pandemic, right? Like they were one check away from not making rent, and it crashed when the pandemic came. So there are people that you and I know, people that probably will never admit it to you till years later, that are sleeping in cars, that are sleeping in bathrooms, that we'll probably never know. And those are the people we're saying no to, because you don't want them in your backyard. Like when we're talking about empathy, like to me, like that's been the biggest thing in LA, of like, you say you understand, but like you said, if it doesn't support your narrative, you don't really want to be a part of it.
Right. It's such a difficult thing to practice, and like I didn't know that that's what they were doing in LA. I guess, are they paying people to convert
Mhm.
their backyards?
Yeah, so it's like a tax credit. You can be rewarded to turn, because most places around here, especially where I live, like there's duplexes or triplexes, and some people have areas zoned to add more units. And so there is a credit to reward people to add on units if they're open to giving it to either Section 8 or specifically people who are unsheltered.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, most people don't want to do it because, and I get that side too. Like there's a stigma with what a homeless person is, right? You assume that every person that's homeless is either involved with crime, has mental health, will bring some type of bad stuff to your property. But I mean, like that's just not the case. Like that's not every single one. There are, like I said, you'd be surprised how many people you see every day that just go and live in their home. I mean, in their car.
Right. Yeah, I don't. It's such a hard issue because the homeless population is getting really bad in LA. It's getting really bad in LA, and it kind of it bothers me when I hear people that are doing fine when they're saying that they don't want to see it. It's like the tone in which they're like, I get it, I understand what you probably mean in your heart by it, but like how it comes out, it's like you think of them as lesser people because
Mm-hmm.
they've fallen on hard times and there's
Mm-hmm.
just nowhere else to go. And
Yep.
it's a problem here because it's happening here in Austin as well. They're trying to figure out what to do with them. Um, and I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. I don't have any good ideas, and I'd hate to be in the position to try and find a remedy for this.
It's a tough one. That's what I was saying. Like there's no one solution. Um, yeah, I would not want to be an elected official during this time, because this is the issue that defines them right now, at least in LA.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point that you about acknowledgement, it's important to acknowledge the issues that exist. I'm not convinced that we do that well in America. I don't think anyone does acknowledgement well in America. I think the only reason, well, let me not say the only reason. I think the primary reason that these issues have gotten more acknowledgement is the fact that everybody was forced to sit at home for a
Yeah.
year in a pandemic. They
Mhm.
couldn't distract themselves with their normal things, the gym, Sunday
Mhm.
brunch, going to the office. It's like, you're at home and now you're just forced to pay attention. So I'm not convinced that and when it comes to empathy, like it's hard to empathize. It's hard to acknowledge,
Yeah.
and so I don't know. I guess I'm a little pessimistic when it comes to talking about how well um, people in general
Yeah.
um, acknowledge hard things.
Yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right. I think people were forced to pay attention because we stayed at home, but I mean, the smartphone has really changed that. I mean, unfortunately, seeing um, Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck for what, almost 9 minutes. Like, you can't ignore that. Homegirl at Central Park that was pretending to be attacked by the black guy, and saying that she was being attacked, and he's literally on his phone, like, please leave me alone. Like, those visuals you can't forget. And the thing is, like, these things have been happening forever. We've been saying it. And this is just specific to the black experience, right? Like, there's still a lot going on in the Asian American community that still needs to be addressed. And it's all because, again, we've been at home and we can turn our cameras on. Like, anyone can report on something happening in their area now. And it's really forcing people to talk about it. And you're right. Like, if if there wasn't such a huge, like, public outcry for justice, this stuff would just be, pushed under the rug, because stuff like this has been happening forever.
It's not
Forever.
new. Yeah, it's not new at all.
Yeah. So when we see this, it's like, it's, and I was talking to my friend about this because we were going back and forth about, as a black woman and as a black person, like, what conversations are you having with non-black people? Like, are you educating them? Are you giving them the context, or are you saying, like, go look it up? And so most of my friends are like, yo, this has been happening forever. I don't want to waste my energy on someone that is, trying to jump on a hashtag, or jump on the black square, or jump on something that is trendy right now because everyone feels like that's the thing to do. I feel like they should go search for the information themselves. And for me, I'm like, if I have the energy, like, let's talk about it, like the way that we're talking now. I would much rather have a conversation. I don't mind talking to someone that genuinely wants to understand it. But I think, like, that's also a real thing where, um should we how are we going to move forward from it? Like, some people are just so exhausted with saying, like, this has been happening forever. We've been yelling at the, like, top of our lungs for years. Like, since slavery, we've been telling you how you've been mistreating us, and it took us, decades for you to finally understand that this is what's happening. And to me, I almost feel like this is our time. Like, this is when people are paying attention. This isn't the time for you to say, I'm mad at you because we've been saying this for years and you haven't been listening. So go figure it out yourself, or go Google it. I'm like, dog, like, we've been waiting for this. Like, we should be explaining this to as many people who want to learn about it as possible, so that they can go talk on behalf of us in rooms that we can't get in. But again, I understand why some people may not want to, because it is tiring, especially if someone is not genuinely trying to make change. But yeah, that's just my opinion.
No, I completely agree with you, and this is exactly the conversation we had during the last podcast. It was about um, black women that just didn't have the energy
Yeah.
to engage in the conversation, or making sure that it was at the appropriate time, like not right before an important meeting, or trying to judge the intent behind the question. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of the school of thought is, if somebody's willing to have the conversation,
Yeah.
I'll have it. If it's
Yeah.
5 minutes before an important meeting, I'm like, hey, this is going to take more than 5 minutes. But if you're really curious, let's talk after.
Yeah.
Like, I am ready to have the conversation, because I feel like that is, I kind of feel like it's a responsibility that we have, um, especially for those who came before us, who paved the way to get where we are, to allow Black people to have opportunities in America, the ones who were patiently yet diligently delivering that message, in the midst of pain, in the midst of police brutality, in the midst of violence. but still willing to march every day. I think it's kind of our responsibility to simply engage in a conversation,
Yeah.
because I think attempting to direct our white brothers and sisters to the internet to do their research is
Hmm.
not an effective way to get to a place of equality and or equity.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, just again, because you know where I stand, but I'll say, bringing it back to communications, it was triggering for me, because a part of the work that I do is I have to write statements for all different brands when stuff like that happened. So, when Black Lives Matter, I'm sorry, when we were talking about George Floyd, I had to write probably 3 to 4 different statements within a matter of an hour after, we learned of this, like how we felt about it. And like, I personally didn't even really get a chance to process it yet, really. Right. And so, I think it just depends on where you are mentally, because I mean, that video was just, I needed a day. Like, I needed a day to like just get it together. Not in the sense of like I'm here crying, even though it was a sad thing, but it was just like, this is on the national stage, and there are people that are still blaming George Floyd for this. Like, this is the country I live in. This is what I say I am a part of. This is what I'm supposed to say my American values represent. And so for me to have to like think about that, but also because of communications, you got to put statements out right away, because if you don't, brands are like, oh, Ben and Jerry's put something out. How come you haven't? How come you haven't? It's kind of hard to acknowledge, but to your point, and like I said, I do think it's worth a conversation. I am now willing to have it, but like I think in that moment when it was happening, it's kind of like, please leave me alone. I can't tell you how many people were like texting me, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, if I say no, what are you going to do about it? Right? Like, I don't want to talk about it, but I'm not okay. So, like, what is the point of you checking on me? And it's tough, because non-Black people, it's like, what are you supposed to do? Like, you don't want to be quiet, because some people are looking at the people who are silent. People who are silent shouldn't be your friend anymore. But then at the same time, someone who checks on you, it's like, but you would never understand if I told you how I feel. So it's kind of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Um, but it's just like, it's tough. But I do agree with you. I think there is a responsibility for us to talk about it and to continue what our ancestors did through marching and giving their lives. But I think it's also important for us to do our own research, because like, being aware, woke, or whatever term you want to use, like I'm still learning, right? Like, I don't know everything. And so I think a part of it is telling people how you feel, but also like, know your history, like take the time to understand it yourself, to understand why people are mad, you know?
Completely agree. And I think that for those people, because it was watching George Floyd's death, um, it was just such a sickening thing, because it was the way it was executed. It was so nonchalant. Derek Chauvin, it was just so he was just so matter of fact, so nonchalant with it, and I think that's what everybody of all colors recognized, that there was just something wrong there. There was something very twisted about the situation that was happening. To some degree, it was more horrifying than like Rodney King's incident, because it's like these officers are angry and they're beating this guy, and yes, you have a helpless man who's on the ground. That doesn't make any sense. That's sickening too, but it's like, here you have someone who just seems to be disconnected from what he's doing, just completely disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
um and for those people who watched the George Floyd incident and are still attempting to blame George Floyd, or find some fault with him or any reason to justify those actions, I'm convinced that there is something broken in those people who cannot acknowledge that, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you have these blatant acts of non-consideration for life. I am convinced that it's that there's something broken inside of those people, like, because at the end of the day, we're all human.
Right.
We're all human, regardless of what our skin looks like or the differences in our hair. It's like you still recognize us as human. So it's like if you have the inability to empathize with an act like that, there's something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. 100%. I just feel like you said, if you watch that video and you didn't feel a sense of injustice and just so many wrongs being committed in that 9 minutes, something is wrong. Um, yeah, broken. And I mean, that goes into a whole other thing about like mental health, but like, yeah.
Whole nother thing. Yeah.
If you watched it and you felt like nothing should be done after that, or you wanted to blame him, there's something wrong with all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I think that is a good note to end on. We had a very, very good conversation, and I thank you for joining on No More Conversations tonight, Miss Jade.
Thank you. Really, really great conversation. Thanks for taking me in all those different directions. And it was, yeah, it was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Hang on. I'm going to stop the recording and I want to chat with you for a few more minutes. So hold on a
Okay.
sec.